Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, rather had fun, yeah.
Do you think Tyson's back in singles?
Jeez, I don't know. The guy's like Iron Man. He like gets pushed down and then he just somehow comes back and has like an incredible week. I mean, he's just a dog. I mean, I know he works harder than probably most of the players out there. He takes his health pretty seriously, his recovery pretty seriously. So to see him out there, I thought was pretty great.
What about his game is different and lends to his longevity? He's been around for a while. I mean, good for a while.
I mean, his serve definitely helps put pressure. I mean, his Yola paddle's the poppiest thing out there.
That helps.
I mean, it definitely helps his game. I think ever since he kind of went to Yola, he's done pretty freaking well. I mean, the guy doesn't miss a dink. He never really has, but some of his resets and stuff he makes is like just incredible. But
I do think that's the Yolas, man. They're
gosh, it's an ongoing storyline with them. I think you really see it on the girls' side though. I mean, some of the players who use Yola, I think their games rise 20%.
100%.
I mean, I saw Chao Yi-Wang beat Paris in the semis of Milwaukee, and not to take anything away from her, she's a great player. She's beautiful strokes. I mean, she hits the crap out of the ball, but seeing it from the sideline and kind of seeing the ball trajectory and stuff from Paris's ball with her Franklin paddle that's very slick, you know, it was just an uphill battle. I mean, it was crazy. So
watching Chao Yi-Wang or Zoe serve is the craziest thing. She swings so slowly at her serve, and the ball just rockets. That's the biggest thing. It's like that serve in particular, and we'll have to find a clip of this. It looks like she's granny serving. It looks like she's tapping this serve, and somehow or another, it's a rocket.
Well, even too, like when she's going in the corners, like she kind of glides along the court, like and she gets to the ball, and you're thinking like, oh, you know, get her on the run. That's what I was always telling Paris, like, get her on the run, get her moving. All of a sudden, she's like in the corner, just blasting forehand winners cross when Paris comes to the net on like a pretty smart ball, and I'm like, not sure really what to say to that, Paris. Like, I don't know how to help you here. Like, this is like an uphill battle. So, yeah, I don't know. The paddle talk is just ongoing. Obviously, I think they're dimming down their paddles next year. Hopefully, well, I mean, I thought their S's were going to be dimmed down, but I don't think that's really the case.
Dude, it's crazy.
They're still flying.
Are you a golfer at all?
Oh, I love golf.
So, you know, there's something to be said. I think this is sort of something you tell beginners. It's like you don't just swing out of your shoes to get distance. You need smooth. It's all about how it contacts. I feel like with these Yola paddles, it's somewhat similar. It's like slow down the swing a little bit, hit that sweet spot.
Right.
And you're actually going to get more velocity.
Right. It's probably like the difference between using like blades and like a way more like thicker kind of club head. I mean, it's just, I've used both blades. Like if you don't hit it in the sweet spot, the ball is stinging your hands. Like it's tough. So I feel like that's definitely similar. I mean, these Yolas, like you just make contact. I feel like they have the biggest sweet spot. I feel like you can swing out and the ball still somehow stays in. I've tried it a couple times. I would totally use a Yola if I could.
You understand that all of this complaining about Yola is just the world's best advertising for them.
It's a compliment. It's a compliment because your paddle is so good. You know, so they've done a great job, honestly, with the technology. I mean, I think you could probably say every company's probably trying to copy them.
Yeah.
And pretty much every company has failed at that expense, just because I don't know. Like it's like the power and the kind of dwell time on the paddle is very unique, and I don't think any paddle has competed with that yet. I would say the second one to that would be Paddletek. But for me, I like the Paddletek maybe a little more than Yola because the crispness that comes off the paddle, that just, you know, helps my game a little more because the ball comes off. I can read it quicker.
The nice part too is like the Paddletek core is a Generation 1 core,
right?
So you can play with the same paddle for. I'm curious how long you use it for. I'm sure some of the texture wears off, but like, how long do you use one of those paddles for? And like, how long could you reasonably use it? Like, if you're an amateur player?
I mean, for me, like I I'm pretty particular. Like coming from tennis, I had all my tennis rackets weighted exactly the same. So if I add like a centimeter of lead tape, I can kind of feel the difference in my hand. So for me, I could tell when the grit wears off. When my serve isn't really getting the height that it needs, or like my shots aren't really grabbing as much. So sometimes I'll use maybe 2 to 3 paddles a tournament.
Okay.
Based off obviously if I'm still winning.
And then you retire those paddles after?
Yeah, I'll retire them, or if they're, I'll use them in practice still. Yeah. I mean, I still feel like the core doesn't really kind of break down. I had one instance where they were kind of failing, on one certain batch, but I think the weather has something to do with that. When it gets hot, it gets all the paddles kind of. I remember we were in Sacramento and like all the paddles were failing just because it was so hot and dry. Where this last week in San Clemente, I didn't have a single paddle fail. So, but I actually switched to a new paddle against Tyson. Literally, I didn't even practice with it or warm up with it. I just went straight on the court with it because I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm going to be able to trust this a little bit better, trust the spin, and that ended up working out. And then I used that same paddle for the finals, just because the grit was still there. So, yeah, it just depends. Yeah, depends on the kind of atmosphere and the heat and all that stuff. So,
gotcha.
But overall, I think they last a decent amount of time. They don't really get delammed, so I think for amateur wise, they're a great paddle for sure.
Yeah. I feel like if you want like kind of that pop from Yola, but you don't want the paddle to be unusable like 3 weeks later, I feel like that's
the Paddletek's probably the next best thing. So for sure, yeah.
All right, we're all getting older. Tough to maintain that energy. And you might be like me where you'll try caffeine, you do some energy chews or something like that. But let's talk about Mitopure, because I think it's a unique solution to the decline of energy, especially when it comes to playing pickleball. It's a health supplement that's in a class of its own. It's not your average supplement. It's designed by over 15 years of dedicated scientific research to go straight to the source of age-related decline, your cells. And it gives them the energy they need to renew themselves and keep you feeling younger and stronger for longer. So it's not the Band-Aid solution, right? It's the long-term solution. Here's just an interesting fact, okay? In just the first 2 days of use, mitophagy begins, and after 2 months of use, muscle endurance increases by over 17%. Overall muscle strength increases by over 12% after 4 months of use. So it's a lot different than taking that energy supplement the day of. This is a long-term solution to fixing your energy. Stop being sluggish, play more pickleball. And by the way, for those wondering, because I was, mitophagy is a process that removes damaged or unnecessary mitochondria from a cell. To save 10% off your first order of Mitopure, go to timeline.com/dink. That's TIMELINE.com/DINK. Okay, so you're wearing a Wilson shirt, but you don't play Wilson Paddle. They're apparel sponsor, right?
Yeah, they give us clothes. We've been kind of with them for a few years now. We're trying to work out, something with the paddles. They're not there yet. Would love to see what that can be with their paddle technology. Their paddle's okay. It's like a, don't really know what I could compare it to. It's just
the old Z5.
Yeah, I don't know, like the old maybe like Electrum kind of stiff paddle. That's the best I could say.
The first Electrum version.
The first Electrum version, yeah. Like it's like okay, it's playable, but it's not like a Paddletek or a Yola or anything.
And you're in between paddles right now, so you're like actively
free agent right now, looking for a sponsor. Shout out.
Could be you.
Would love to keep playing with Paddletek, work something out there. I mean, Paddletek's, their paddles we've been using them for 5 months now. They've been gracious enough to give us paddles, and hopefully we can figure something out there. I would love to keep this momentum going with the paddle I'm using. So yeah, we'll see.
Without, you don't have to name the paddle brands, but would you say that there's maybe like 3 to 5, maybe less brands you're like, I think I need to play with one of these just to have a fair shot? Like, I guess the question is the disparity between paddles significant enough right now that it essentially will impact your success?
Yeah, I mean, you look at some paddle companies that and it goes for game styles as well, I think. For me, it's like I would definitely need a poppier paddle that can grab the ball, just because of my game. It's bigger. I need kind of that swing weight on the paddle, that pop off the paddle. Like, you know, I've used a Franklin before, like a carbon. I've used certain paddles, and I could definitely play with them. But I think once they really start to figure out the power situation, I think when's that going to be? In next June, I think, is when they're really going to dial it in, something like that. So I mean, it's going to even out. So I think whatever paddle company I choose, I think it's really most important of like the partnership that we can create and the maybe paddle we can create together and technology that's best for the market. That's really what we're looking for. Me and Yates is just not necessarily what they have now, but kind of maybe their vision of what they want in the future. Because pickleball is always changing. So whatever paddle company we go with, I think that's the biggest thing for us. So
yeah, you guys like shopping around like a package deal?
Yeah. I mean, the twin thing's definitely a seller. You know, Wilson really loves that about us. Obviously, Yates was like, 15 in singles. I think he was on the trajectory to definitely be top 10 before he got injured in Atlanta, unfortunately. So he's been out ever since then. He's just rehabbing, really kind of making sure his body's right before he comes back next year. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see us both being top 5 singles at some point in our careers. So yeah, if we can stay together, that's great. I think it's there's a lot that can be had with the twin thing.
Yeah.
For paddles. So, we're open to both maybe, but I think staying together is pretty powerful.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, rather had fun,